we're going to look at testing, what you should test, when you should test, and how you should test. And I'm going to reference some data which has got scores for various tests for levels of long and triple jumpers, from young athletes through to mature athletes. Jumpers jumping between 5 meters 80 and 7 meters for women. So that data will act as a reference point for you to place yourself against developmental norms and scores. We need to make sure that we test what we want to test. Now that sounds obvious, but many times we will do tests that have little relevance to the time of the training year and indeed our training program. So let me explain a little bit more. Well, you've got to test what is meaningful. So doing, for example, standing long jump may appear to be a meaningful test, but will it really predict long jump distance? The ability to standing long jump is very much predicated on an ability to express force relatively slowly. Therefore, its relevance directly to determining long jump distance is, in my opinion, pretty spurious. Now you may study the chart and you'll see that a 7 meter jumper or a 650 to 7 meter jumper, for example, is expected to have a 3 meter standing long jump or thereabouts. Well, to me that's pretty obvious, and we're working backwards from the ability to jump 7 meters rather than working forwards from the ability to jump 3 meters from a standing long jump. This is not to say that certain tests aren't relevant to do at certain points of the training year. For example, when you return to training in October, you're not really going to do fly 20 and 10 meter tests on day one. However, within the first week or two of training, you could, for example, do standing long jump, standing triple jump, 4 bounds a jump, for example. At the end of my block 1, we will do those tests and also fly 10s, because 10 meters is not too long and there shouldn't be so much stress on the body. And of course, my training program being highly specific and with all the factors that are designed to improve long jump, triple jump and sprints contained within it from the start, allow the athletes to perform such a test with a minimum risk of injury and hopefully 0 injury risk. That's crucial. Do not test what you're not doing in training. For example, we very rarely throw weights shots overhead or forwards, for example, although we do some medicine ball work. Now, I, like many coaches, do modify and change my tests across the training year. Now, we don't add in different and more different tests all the time. What we do is stick to a core of tests, and I will introduce the more pertinent ones, such as the fly 20 and 10-step long jumps, after about 1 block of training. Then they will remain in the schedule once a month on average for the rest of the training year. So this means that the athletes have got ready for the tests, and therefore the training is going to subsequently hopefully improve their scores on those tests. Our training will improve the physical qualities, the technical qualities, the elastic qualities, the power, force development, rate of force development, for example, of the jumpers. Therefore, certain other tests should improve. However, I am not deliberately trying to construct a training program that's going to improve standing, bounding and standing long jump, for example. I want greater momentum to be the key driver of the athletes, and therefore the tests such as the 10 stride long jump, the fly 20s and 10s are what really matters. In your own time, study the contents of the test data and look at the performances of your jumpers against them and the most important tests that I've identified and also that you think are relevant for your jumpers. We've found that the scores are particularly relevant and they do predict ability, particularly the speed tests and the 10 stride jump tests for long and triple jump. Of course, it's great for the athletes to identify where they sit against these developmental norms for maturing and elite jumpers relative to age. But we must not get carried away from the fact that just because you're good at one test or a couple of tests will directly mean that you can jump the distances as indicated. What you need to do is look at where you sit in regards to the key tests, the key metrics for you, which, as I keep identifying in this video, for me anyway, are the speed and jump tests. Then you can place yourself more readily against the developmental norms. As, for example, as I've said, having a great power clean or standing long jump alone won't indicate that you're going to jump 660, 670, 680 or beyond. Testing is of course a great motivator for the athletes, and it's something that they will target and focus on, and as is human nature, compare themselves against their fellow athletes. So we do need to be mindful of that and make sure that they're not overcooked before the tests, or indeed overcooked subsequent to the testing, as it is a bit like a mini competition. There are other tests that I utilise that aren't on this particular data set, and I'll talk very briefly about those now. The other test that I'm particularly keen on, particularly as we get into my blocks 3, 4 and 5 and 7, 8, 9 and 10, which are the peak season indoor and outdoor training blocks, is one that identifies speed distribution on the runner. Now, as with the fly 10s and fly 20 metre tests, you are dependent on having an accurate timing system. Now, I use the free lap timing system, and that's capable of timing over 10 metre segments. Ideally, we'd want to be able to time over the individual steps coming into the takeoff to look at where the speed variation is, for example. However, we can't do that. So what I do is I time from 21 metres to 11 metres and 11 metres to 1 metres into the board, and we look at speed distribution. We manipulate, or rather the jumpers try to manipulate the speed they generate in the alignment phase of the run-up from 21 metres to 11 metres out, in order to generate more speed over the last 10 metres. Many times by doing that, by speeding up in the middle phase, that alignment phase, we can get more speed across the board. And the other thing that the test does, it takes away some of the inhibitions that can be there from just doing run-ups with a takeoff, for example. So not only is it a test, but it's a way of opening up the potential to developing greater speed into the takeoff. Now, of course, you have to record the data from your tests and also from any other timing sessions that you do, for example, on the run-up, off the run-up and on the track, for example, so you can determine, get an understanding of when your jumpers are coming into peak performance, when they are perhaps better than they were in the previous year. And that's very important knowledge data to have. Over time, you can work out how well you're shaping your training, whether you need to make any changes, and with that data, you're going to be in a much better position to be able to work out, as I've said, if the training program is functioning to its optimum extent. If you'd like to find out more about testing and my training programs and how it all dovetails together, then do consider becoming a channel member at Coach Athlete level. Head over to the channel's homepage, click on the membership tab, and you'll be taken through to the Coach Athlete offering. Any questions, then do leave them in the section below or through my other social media. Like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.